For my presentation, I chose the article Sorry, Wrong Jonathan Martin. Jonathan Martin, a political reporter for the New York Times, began receiving tweets, some encouraging, others degrading, regarding his choice to leave the Dolphins for a short period of time due to bullying. What these avid tweeters didn't know is they had the wrong Jonathan Martin. They were tweeting at a journalist, not the 6'5", 312-pound starting lineman of the Miami Dolphins. In this article, Martin discusses how he dealt with the endless Twitter rant. There were what I believe to be three main points in his rhetorical aim. First, he had to inform all the readers of Jonathan Martin's story, for those of you who hadn't heard of it or who weren't avid sports fans. Secondly, he wanted to show how people are quick to jump to conclusions without having all the facts at times. Most of the cases, they would just tweet at him without even really checking his handle. If they would have looked at it, they would realize it said NYT, which stood for New York Times. And if they would have just looked at his description, they would have realized he wasn't the actual Jonathan Martin they were looking for. And finally, his main goal was to entertain the reader with his story. The most important piece of evidence in his story was his use of pictures to show how people attacked and encouraged him on Twitter. Also, he had his tweets linked to his Twitter so you could actually view his Twitter. And my first thing is his Twitter account, which I mentioned earlier. If they would have just read right here, it tells him he works for the New York Times, and he's definitely not the starting tackle of the Miami Dolphins. My next picture is a couple of the tweets that they tweeted at him. I believe the first one was positive, and the next one was negative. There was a couple other ones I could have used, but they were a bit vulgar, so I decided they probably weren't the best for class. So the effective parts of his story were he starts out with a comical attention getter and continues with his first paragraphs, and he kind of like makes you want to draw. He draws in readers that aren't necessarily sports fans or really care about the Miami Dolphins, but it still makes you want to read. He also uses another man's story to show other people have gone through what he has. The quote I have down below is actually from a Baltimore sportscaster who was receiving a lot of nasty tweets after the whole Jerry Sandusky situation went down in Penn State, and he acknowledges he definitely had it harder than him. So his final effective part of his article was his use of pictures to show how people attacked and encouraged him on Twitter. So rather than just having to take his word for it, you actually got to see what had happened to him. Some of his ineffective points were he tells a backstory of his life that doesn't really go with the article late in the story. The quote down here, I still have close friendships with some of my high school football teammates. The bullying we received as underclassmen was mild, just the occasional dead fish left in our shoulder pads. I was not going to come close to the NFL. This quote would have suited a lot better purpose towards the beginning of the article, maybe to like start to tie in like his story to what he knows to what this guy's going through. See somehow if they can like relate them maybe. But then another part of his ineffective things where he used all his images in the beginning of the story. So instead of breaking them up to kind of break up from like reading to viewing something, you were just all at once seeing everything, and then there was nothing left to show. Some of the insight I got from this was he captured a lot of details that kept the reader interested. He's definitely a very skilled writer. I was interested the whole time. I mean, I'm also a big sports fan, so it was something that was up my alley. But he also uses comic relief throughout the article that just kind of like makes you chuckle here and there. Wasn't anything extremely funny, but it was just enough to keep you entertained. It was just an overall well-written article. So if you'd like to view it, I have the link right down here. Feel free to look at it. Look at the other tweets that I told you about earlier. Hope you enjoyed my presentation.